For my digital report, I chose to explore Unitarian Universalism. I went to the local chapter, the Greenville Unitarian Universalism Fellowship, which is run by Reverend Hockman. Unitarian Universalism accepts people of all goodwill, no matter what their religion or lack of religion is. As such, it can be hard to articulate what their beliefs are in regards to things like, is there a God, sacred text, and life after death, because any one member might have different beliefs. Instead, what they focus on is what unites them, which is their dedication to their shared values, which are justice, equity, generosity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and most importantly, love. According to Reverend Hockman, Unitarian Universalism has its origins in Christianity, originally Protestant, and then two separate churches, the Unitarian and the Universalists. Both of them came to the same conclusion that everyone should be welcome, but they came to these conclusions in different ways. Unitarians were more logical and reasoned that if God died for everyone's sins, then everyone should be welcomed. Universalists were more the heart and believed that if God loves everyone, then everyone should be welcome. These two combined in 1961 to make the Unitarian Universalists. Because they accept people of any religion, and even those without religion, they are no longer considered Christian, but their own separate thing. My experience going to the church was very positive. I was immediately welcomed. The second I got out of my car, a member struck up a conversation with me as we walked to the church. As I entered, there was a greeter who was very excited to hear that it was my first time there, and he introduced me to some other workers, and they were also very excited. They gave me a hugs and welcomed me. And even when I was in the service, as I was struggling with the hymn book, the man beside me noticed that I was struggling and silently helped me without ever saying a word. And it was very, very comforting. The general atmosphere was very relaxed, but the sermon was more subdued and, in a way, ritualistic. The Sunday service I attended was about living with anxiety. The sermon began with a woman welcoming us to the service and confirming that this congregation is open to people of all sexual and gender identities, races, ethnicities, abilities, religious history, and spirituality. The youth pastor read the children's book, The What Ifs, which is a non-religious book about a kid overcoming their anxiety to perform at a piano recital. Then he and the children left for the children's worship as we sang to them as they walked out. We sang 3 hymns, which were all vaguely spiritual without being of one obvious religion. And the sermon itself was based on the book Don't Feed the Monkey Mind: How to Stop the Cycle of Anxiety, Fear, and Worry by Jennifer Shannon, who is a licensed psychotherapist. In her opening sentence, Reverend Hockman said, "Anxiety. Why talk about anxiety in church of all places? Isn't church supposed to be a place where you go to find peace and get away from anxiety?" Well, in case you haven't noticed, we live in a very anxious society. I immediately found this interesting, as the Reverend specifically calls out the idea of religion as just the opium of the people, as Karl Marx is famously quoted, and preaches that there should never be complacency. In fact, during our interview, Reverend Hockman admitted she was disappointed that the Unitarian Universalist Church had gotten complacent in years past and was eager to contribute more to social justice. The advice in the sermon was practical and based in cognitive behavioral therapy. She preached to feel your feelings, to get through them. You can't repress or distract because this doesn't solve anything and just makes anxiety worse. Again, something that Karl Marx would not necessarily agree that church would be saying that. The Reverend also suggests seeking help from a professional, not necessarily just a sermon. And then she brought it back to real life and preached the importance of knowing this to protect yourself and others from those who would manufacture fear and anxiety to justify authoritarianism. In our interview, Reverend Hockman confirmed that they have around 270 members, and when I went to the Sunday service, the fellowship hall was small and at about 50% capacity. The demographics were 90% retirement aged white people, 5% younger white adults, and 5% people of color. Reverend Hockman confirmed the majority of members were older and white, and actually, when I asked about the two biggest problems facing them today, their aging out congregation and lack of diversity was the Reverend's answer. The Reverend said that racial diversity is very important to them, and actually, Unitarian Universalists participated in the civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King Jr. actually gave a sermon at a Unitarian Universalist fellowship in which he called them his friends. They are attempting to increase diversity by trying to make the sermons more lively and less stuffy, completing anti-racist workshops, being open about their shortcomings, addressing and correcting members when they do or say something insensitive, even if it was unintentional. In the foyer, there were actually pamphlets on how white Unitarian Universalist members could work to dismantle white supremacy in their faith. Unitarian Universalists are also very accepting of all sexual and gender identities. There were pride flags in the foyer and in the fellowship hall, and upon entering, the greeter actually gave me a sticker that said "Love is Love" with a rainbow. There also seemed to be a few queer people in attendance, although these are assumptions on my part as I didn't think it was appropriate to ask strangers personal questions. The Greenville Unitarian Universalist Fellowship is headed by a female reverend, and most of the leadership seemed to be women, though there were some men as well. Reverend Hockman confirmed that the majority of ministers in Unitarian Universalists identify as women, and that there are men, non-binary, and trans ministers and leaders as well. Unitarian Universalists believe that everyone is equal, regardless of sex or gender, and they also champion women's rights and provide reproductive justice resources on their website. I left the Greenville Unitarian Universalist Fellowship with a very positive experience and a positive impression. I would definitely feel comfortable becoming a member because I know that their values align with my own.